Hello, I'm State Representative Jim Arciero, and welcome to my Zoom edition of From the Hill. And certainly, we're going on to probably about our fifth week now during this pandemic, the COVID-19 coronavirus. It's a very unsettling time, certainly something that we've never seen in our lifetime. I talk to so many constituents a day and small business owners, and there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty. Again, I saw a quote the other day from Governor Andrew Cuomo. I thought was really interesting to kind of start the show off, and he said that the generations that stormed Normandy and the generations that marched for freedom. We need to help them now by staying home, by making sure that we protect people who are susceptible to COVID-19 more easily, or individuals who are older in age that could contract COVID a little bit easier. Again, we will get through this. This is going to take some time. It's going to take some patience, probably more patience than we've ever had. There's been dramatic changes to our business climate. There's been dramatic changes to education, our education system. So many people now are dealing with a completely different home life than they did 5 weeks ago. And it's unsettling. But I think the important thing is that your partners and your friends in government and in business, that we all continue to work together to get through this, because that certainly is going to be the only way that we persevere and we get to the other side of the mountain. Really is going to be working together and sharing accurate information about, of course, I've mentioned this in my last show. I think it's important to continue to mention it, is to practice social distancing, to make sure you wash your hands for 30 Mississippis and soap underneath a sink, to make sure that you're checking in with your family and your friends, either through Zoom or by phone, to make sure that there's important resources here in Westford and throughout my district, the councils on aging, as well as the Westford, Littleton, and Chelmsford health departments have been just wonderful at keeping people informed of what's going on. And it's unsettling, like I've said a few times in the first few minutes. There's changes with whether it be with changes to businesses or changes from the federal and state government to help with resources, with making sure that people are safe and we have economic recovery. But on that theme, a few things I wanted to talk about was that unemployment continues to rise, something that is certainly a scary thing when it comes to one of our worst economic recessions since the Great Depression. We now have some statistics yesterday that the governor had put forward that we're almost at 470,000 people that are unemployed, and almost 17 million nationwide. Recently, the working in conjunction with Governor Baker's administration and the state Senate, we were able to streamline unemployment services in terms of getting rid of that week waiting period, making sure that individuals sign up through public information to find out a little bit about unemployment if they've lost their job and been laid off. Also about small business loans. I think for the most part so far, I have been getting just numerous calls a day from business owners in the region and individuals to understand what their resources are and what they can do. Today I have a good friend of mine that's on the show, and my second Zoom show, Brad MacDougall, who's the Senior Vice President for the Associated Industries of Massachusetts. That is the business advocacy group for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a group that has really been a wonderful resource for legislators and other business leaders alike. From my time in office, Brad and I, my goodness, Brad, we go back maybe 16, 17 years back. I think when you worked for Congressman Marty Meehan doing veterans issues, and a lot of economic development things in the Merrimack Valley. I think at the time I was working for Senator Steve Pagitakis, so we became friends at that time, and we've worked together. We got through. You were a great resource, for sort of navigating through the economic recession of 2009. Yeah. Things have, obviously things had improved quite a bit. Our unemployment rate, Brad, was probably under 4 before this pandemic. Yeah. And I just want to welcome you to the show. And basically, we're gonna kind of make this show about a resource for small businesses and for individuals that want to learn a little bit more of what they can do when their world has been turned upside down in this last 5 weeks. And Brad, I just want to thank you for coming on and welcome you to the show.
No, thank you, Representative, and really appreciate it. And you remind us how long and how older we've become in the last 10 plus years, but we have been through a lot. And
your children now too, right?
Yeah. So if we have any kids bouncing in the background, it's all good. But I think first and foremost, just thank you to you and for your outreach to your constituents, your small businesses in your district. It's vital what you're doing, what your colleagues are doing in the legislature. It's overwhelming for anyone. This isn't something that any one of us has been, it's brand new. We haven't ever been exposed to something like this before. So it's going to take, as our CEO and John Regan and my boss, Brooke Thompson, our Executive Vice President for Government Affairs, as they're working with businesses, our board, members of the administration. It's the quote of the day when we were on a Zoom meeting yesterday was, it's going to take a village and a half. And it's going to take all of us and then some to get a lot of this work done. So just very much appreciate the collaboration that you've had and all of your colleagues in the legislature.
And a few weeks ago, again, you kind of hit it right on the head, a village and a half. In this last 5 weeks, things are so much different, I think, with business and government and our everyday lives. And we're resilient people. We're going to get through this, like I said, but it's going to take some time and some patience. One of the initiatives I think that we had put through right away was regarding our state taxes, right? On April 15th, a lot of individuals were worried about taxes. We made that July 15th, uniform that with the federal changes that they have. We also gave some benefits for small businesses in terms of their April and March and May tax deadlines if they were making under $150,000. That'll still be that was moved to June 20th to give a little bit of breathing room. Who knows? That might have to be changed again. That's how unprecedented this time is. The legislature, working with the governor's office, provided $20 million in small business loans, which was up to $75,000 per business. And I think I'm going to start there because we've exhausted that already. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, it's the Capital Growth Corporation was, as anyone could guess, was very much inundated with a lot of applications. So it's going to take, like we talked earlier, it's going to take a lot of resources and a lot of efforts from a lot of different locations, and it's going to flow from resources at the state level. It's going to require things that come from the CARES Act, what might come from the federal government as a follow-on, and really there's ongoing efforts even from a philanthropic effort that are going to be helpful, and even larger businesses that are trying to create separate funds to help out, whether they're nonprofits, healthcare institutions, or other types of areas. It's going to take a lot of different funds and resources and collaboration on that front, especially from a lot of the financial institutions that are now in charge of trying to help facilitate a lot of those loans and grants.
Now, an interesting thing, and this is probably why I thought you were a great guest for my show, Brad, is that only in this last 3 weeks, I've called you up to talk to some of my small business owners in my district. Like I said, there are some of the people I get the most calls from. And just the concern and the fear of how we're going to persevere through this and how they're going to be able to pick themselves up and stop the bleeding for this time period. And like you said, there is no time period, right? I mean, there's statistics that we read about flattening the curve, but the stay-home order could be extended past May 4th, and that is the day that we're looking at right now. I don't want to say that. I'm an optimistic person like you are and so many of our colleagues, but we have to be prepared for everything. And I've had connected you with a number of the business owners that and it's really been well received that you've been able to help direct them. Let me just throw this scenario at you.
Yeah.
So I'm a small business in Westford. Let's just say I own 2 brick and mortar places. And, obviously we've gone through this unprecedented economic downturn. I've seen a few things on Facebook that our state rep has put out there, or our town board of selectmen has had a link to on an email. What would you suggest if my business went belly up, just like so many have right now, and maybe I don't have takeout, or I'm not and not like that's going to be enough economic activity to keep people afloat either, but I don't have, another means of any kind of revenue. What would you suggest I would do? The first thing.
Well, there's a lot of things. I think if you can indulge me in a little bit of a story opportunity here, I think, as you've said, we've gotten calls from your constituents and others, and they're heart-wrenching, right? Because you get these calls a lot, and it's people that usually it's a last call of resort, and they're in a really tough spot. And so through us and through our AIM-HR solutions team, we have a hotline, and we've been getting hundreds of calls a day and trying to answer people. And I think the first step in the guidance that we've had has largely been about trying to provide that constituent. And for instance, a company that called us, small business, didn't know what to do next, just really trying to listen and understand what their issues are and calm them down, because there's so much information, both from the federal government, the state, locals, that's trying to figure out what is real and what is not. And our hope for you as an elected official is to provide information to you and or your constituents that really cuts through all of that and really just gives you what you need to do. So I think listening is probably the first step in trying to source your information. And I think the difference and the opportunity that we have at AIM and other places, that as your constituent businesses are working with their business, their small business lender or elected officials, et cetera, that while those are all very helpful, vital, and needed, they need to cut through the noise and figure out what steps they need to take. And it can be different for everybody, and that's the challenging part of it too. So our big first step has largely been to educate people about what is out there. And in many instances, what is out there and what their decisions could be would really vary between the size of business. But we've been really trying to coach people about what's in the CARES Act, what's available at the state level, what can they do. What has been incredibly pleasantly surprising and fortunate is that we've been hearing so many stories about businesses really trying to first protect their people by making sure that they continue some sort of payroll. That's been one of the biggest factors. And then the second one is, how do we not only make sure we keep our payroll with our people, but they still need healthcare coverage. So how do we make sure that we cover their healthcare? And largely what we've been trying to do, as you said, with the federal programs coming out really, really fast, has been trying to really educate people about the Paycheck Protection Act and get them knowledgeable about that, getting their forms into financial institutions, and really trying to help them with our partners at the SBA, especially the Massachusetts and the Northeast Regional Branch Office, who have been really, really significantly helpful to a lot of businesses directly.
When the CARES Act was passed, that was $2 trillion for obviously for the nation. There were things that were specific to enhancing, if you will, unemployment insurance
Right.
for people who slip through the cracks. There was some discussion about unemployment insurance for people who have gig jobs, if you will, as well as individuals who are 1099. Talk a little bit about what a gig job is and how those people somehow feel or could feel displaced right now.
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of people out there that are either in a position where they file every year as a 1099 worker, or they're a small business. They're self-employed. They're doing their own consulting gig, and they're either a marketing person or a consulting person. They're probably even doing stuff like you and I are doing right now. They're really trying to keep their business afloat by getting on Zoom calls and trying to get out through LinkedIn all their services and things like that. And they're in a particularly tough spot. And so a lot of what the federal government did was they took and expanded the normal unemployment insurance program that usually, for instance, Brad MacDougall worker gets unemployed or furloughed or laid off, acceptable to go and get unemployment insurance. But under the current rules, those types of folks wouldn't be eligible, and largely because they haven't been paying into that unemployment insurance system, and because it wasn't really built for that part of the economy, which has become so substantial, especially here in Massachusetts. So what I think is occurring is, yes, from the federal government, we're getting a lot of resources in order to provide for relief for 1099 worker or self-employed individuals. And really what we're trying to do, as you just said, the state just unprecedented and just a huge credit to and ongoing to the Baker administration and their team and the staff. I got off the phone with someone last night at 10 o'clock, and even earlier than that, a DUA rep, the Division of Unemployment Assistance, probably about 6:37, trying to track down an employer who's trying to help out someone that they ended up having to lay off, but wanted to still further help that individual to get unemployment benefits. So still they're working through their 500,000 folks, and they've worked through a lot of those. But the individuals that they're trying to work to help out are those independent contractors and self-employed. And that's just the real challenge. The state needs to get those folks built into the system, and the governor and others have talked about that. And it's going to take time. But I think as soon as we find out what that information is, we've been trying to help guide the administration and or provide feedback. And they've been great back and forth with trying to understand and communicate information. So once we get information about those communities of folks, we're going to make sure we get that information out clearly, because it's going to be another jump of folks applying for those benefits, and applying and how you apply is going to be really important. So we don't make mistakes, and applications move as smoothly as possible.
I think in the governor's press conference, he specifically talked about how there would be a delay for gig workers, and we're still trying to figure out how the actual system would be able to handle that. I think one of the things I know you've heard it, we've talked about it, and I've heard it from small business owners in Westford, is that when they tried to apply for the loan program, or some people were applying for unemployment employees, the system was crashing. So it's something obviously that it's a capacity issue too, and it's just so unprecedented how many people have applied for unemployment so quickly that to look at the gig employees and 1099 and part-time contractual stuff. We're trying to get our arms around it and help everybody, but the governor's press conference said that it's going to take some time. We wrote some letters. There was a number of letters, actually, the correspondence that went out by the Senate and the House and other members to expedite that as quickly as possible to get people those benefits. But again, it's going to be, I have underscore patience, right?
No, it is. It can be for all of us in this. It's incredibly frustrating, challenging, but we're working through it. And you're right, patience is huge, and just the volume of this has been astronomical. And just appreciate, though, too, the fact that it went from a I think like a 50-person call center. Now it's up to over 600 people. So I think that, between those folks in state government, businesses contacting us, asking for help, we're really trying to help individuals and employees that I think a lot of Massachusetts employers really hope that once we move through this, that we're able to bring those folks back really quickly, because a lot of employers are really struggling with the fact that they had to lay off people or had to furlough people. Has not been an easy process thus far.
Now, you talked a little bit, Brad. You made reference to the Paycheck Protection Program.
Right.
You walk me through that a little bit. If I'm a small business, what is that?
Yeah. So the Paycheck Protection Act is it's built by Congress to allow for a lot of businesses, largely with 500 or less employees, to access capital. Basically, a lot of your businesses are struggling with, how do I pay the bills? How do I pay the rent? How do I pay the utilities? And so as we get phone calls about those challenges, that's where we're sending and talking to people, to their financial lenders, to the folks that they may have an existing relationship with at a bank, and trying to figure out, and even some commercial lenders are now starting to go from, do I work with folks that are my existing customers? And then they're trying to now, as the program is rolling out, how do I add new clients in a way of helping out people that I may not have had a relationship with? So I don't know if that has happened to you and your constituents, but there's folks out there that are calling us and will say, geez, my bank may or may not be able to help me, but can somebody else help me? And so more banks are coming online as they're really learning this program. So, but the intent of it is an application process where someone can get almost up to $10 million of a loan. And some of that can be forgiven, if not a significant proportion of it, for using it for payroll, keeping people on the payroll, including benefits and paid sick time, and other things like rent and utility. So those are significant things to try to help. I think, to your earlier point about folks that are really struggling, that may not have a lifeline right now, that can't have, switch and change their business model or allow for different types of revenue sources. That's been a really go-to place to maintain operations.
Now, what about the SBA Express Bridge Loan Program? I've heard a number of business advocates bring this up too as another sort of option or resource.
Yeah, it is one, and it's one where our friends at the SBA in Boston have been advocating for, and it is a different avenue. And I would just urge that folks talk to. What we're trying to do is kick out some FAQs on these particular items, and so in the near term, we'll get that to you and other members of the legislature on what are these programs, what do they look like, and if I make a decision to go in the Express program, is that different than the Paycheck Protection Program, or what are my options? And so it's a program, but the question becomes, what does the company need, and what are the conditions that underlie that program? And we're starting to hear a mix, like you were saying, some measures of frustration. That's real. I think we're also starting to hear, and hopefully we'll hear even more stories of positiveness where people are in fact getting and hearing from their banking institutions and the SBA that their loans have been approved. So I know our CEO heard from a member in the last 24 hours that their loan was approved. So I think as this starts to roll out more, we're going to start to hear more of, and hopefully we'll hear more of those positive stories.
Now, let me ask you this question. We've talked, a little bit about some of the programs that are available on the state level, mostly on the federal level when it comes to SBA loans now. And we talked a little bit how they're sort of funneled through, different state agencies, if you will, from the federal government. But I remember having a conversation with you about one of my constituents who's a business owner. And you told me that one of the things he should probably do first is talk to his bank. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was really where I started with, was because more often than not, I think like what a lot of our phone calls that we're getting, people are just saying, where can I go first? And so often a lot of businesses already have a banking institution financial relationship, and often a lot of the banks that we work with that are members of AIM, both from very large institutions to statewide or regional banks and community banks, they're really working hard, have created COVID-specific programs, created COVID-specific outreach and proactive pieces. We've heard from our banking members that they're proactively reaching out to their customers and trying to figure out ways that they can help in any way that a bank can. And that comes in a lot of different forms. And sometimes banks are extending lines of credit. Sometimes banks are trying to help renegotiate things. And so it's not easy, but I think that's been one of the best pieces of advice on a lot of things, has been to try to go back to some of those relationships that you already have and try to figure out what those solutions can be.
And the small business portal that you see on the mass.gov website is now also directing us to federal options and federal resources.
Right.
So that's probably your second stop, right?
Right, and more is coming too. Other colleagues were watching this from the Fed and the state and all in between, and got an update from one of my colleagues a little while ago, saying an update about a Main Street lending program that we knew about in the last couple of days, was as a result of the Federal Reserve, who's trying to put liquidity into the market, trying to put more money into the Paycheck protection program. The more of that information is going to be coming soon. So there's a lot of different opportunities out there, and our hope is to try to, as people are overwhelmed, and even we are too. We do this stuff for a living, and we're overwhelmed too. And
you've been tremendous when it comes to adding a personal touch, and I'm glad you're on the show, and that there's about a handful of small business owners in this town of Westford alone that I've talked to you personally, and I'll probably put you on the hook to talk to them again.
Sure.
But and you've been a great resource for that. But my takeaways, just talking to you right now, essentially is take a deep breath if you're a small business.
Yeah.
Listen to what the resources are. Talk to your local banks, people you have relationships with, and look to your state resources and federal resources to see how you can, really stop the bleeding and get through this.
Yeah, no, you've hit it correctly, Representative. It's amazing how much noise is out there, and I thought that there was a lot of noise even, last couple months, even before this really hit. There's a ton of noise, whether it's coming through your phone or anywhere else, but the noise level has ratcheted up even more than that. So our hope, at least for you and your colleagues in the legislature, your constituent businesses and others, we've opened up our website as a free resource. It's usually been something where we provide that to our members, but I think right now our goal is to help as many businesses as we can. It's a day-by-day effort. We're doing webinars that we're doing every week, trying to really help step by step go through, whether it's HR issues or it's SBA loan processes or tax issues, really just trying to help out and, tracking things on social media. And yeah, it's taking a breath, it's picking up a phone and trying to get to the right information and the right people. And that's not easy, but that's what we're trying to do here at AIM. And one of the things that I think we're really proud of and happy about is the expertise we have, but the expertise comes from a lot of constituent businesses in your district and throughout the state. I mean, there's so many examples of companies that have gone through a lot of these challenges, but now are repurposing what they're doing. And so there's companies that used to make spirits are now making hand sanitizer, and people that used to make suits are now making masks. And companies are ramping up whatever they can do and however they can do. And so amidst all of this crisis and frustration and challenge there, we'll work through this, and we're here to do that with you. And so we just really appreciate you and the legislature as a partner in this. So
your webinars have been very well received. And, obviously, that information will be provided, and how people can get in touch with AIM and, some of the services you guys provide too. Look, again, village and a half, right, Brad?
Big time, big time. But thank you to you and to the TV station too for hosting us today. Appreciate it.
So to all my friends at home, I'm going to be doing a weekly video update on things that are changing so rapidly in our response to the coronavirus. I hope this at least helped to start, turning the cranks on additional resources you may have not explored yet, or resources that you haven't used in terms of calling myself or the Associated Industries of Massachusetts for their webinars that are very helpful, or through the governor's office to find out if you need to apply for a small business loan, through the CARES Act, the federal government. They're all resources that, folks, it's not an easy thing. And that's why you elect people to help you navigate through it and get you the resources that you deserve to get through this crisis. So I will say goodbye for now, and I will see hopefully my audience probably next Friday. We're doing this every Friday. So thank you.